My name is Abigail Monroe. I'm 32 years old, and on the day we gathered for the inheritance distribution, my sister looked me in the eyes and told the lawyers, just skip her name. Dad never trusted her with anything anyway. And everyone was silent. I sat there, smiling, until I turned to my father and said softly, Dad, don't you know? That moment, right there, was the crack in the floor of our family. The first quake before the emotional earthquake. Before I continue, please stay with me to the end of this story. And if you're new here, subscribe for more true life emotional stories like this. You need to understand something before you judge anyone in this story. I wasn't always the quiet one. As kids, I was once the bright spark, the girl with the high grades, capable of laughter, sunshine, ambition. But there was someone who slowly subdued that light. Eleanor Monroe, my older sister by 4 years. Growing up in Columbus, Ohio, in a typical suburban house with a big backyard and a swing set that our father built himself, people thought our family was idyllic. But behind closed doors, there was a different atmosphere, one where Eleanor was the princess, the favorite child, and I was the shadow. Dad always said Eleanor was responsible, refined, and dependable. He said I was emotional, impulsive, and too sensitive. Mom tried to balance it, but she always had a soft spot for Eleanor too. It wasn't malicious, it was habit. Eleanor was the achiever, the socially composed, well-spoken darling who got into private schools, international internships, and business networking circles Dad sponsored. Meanwhile, I went to public school, worked part-time jobs, and built myself from the ground up. As children, Eleanor wasn't cruel in ways that left visible marks. She didn't hit me or scream at me. No, her cruelty was subtle, hidden behind smiles and carefully chosen words. On Christmas mornings, for example, she would open some expensive, elegant gift from her parents, and I'd get something modest, like a book or a sweater. Eleanor would pat me gently on the shoulder and say, one day you'll earn nice things too, Abby. As if I hadn't earned anything yet. As if love was something to qualify for. Dad owned a mid-sized logistics company, and he always hinted that Eleanor would one day inherit leadership of it. It was never openly stated, but always implied. I studied marketing, hoping maybe I could at least contribute to the business in some way. When I graduated, Dad offered me a position in the basement warehouse office. Eleanor was given an executive assistant role right beside Dad's corner office. She was wearing fitted blazers, speaking confidently in strategy meetings, and networking with clients. I was entering shipment invoices on an old computer surrounded by boxes and dust. I told myself it was temporary. I believed that if I worked hard, he would eventually see my dedication. But one afternoon, I overheard something that shattered that hope. I was coming upstairs to the main hallway when I heard Dad speaking to a colleague. Abigail just doesn't have leadership in her. She's soft. She feels too much. We can't run a company on feelings. And the colleague laughed and agreed. That humiliation never left me. Our mother, sweet, gentle, quiet, tried to defend me one time. I distinctly remember her saying, "You underestimate Abigail. She sees things emotionally, yes, but that's a strength. She understands people." Dad dismissed it with a wave of his hand, and Eleanor was there, leaning back with her confident posture, nodding, drinking Dad's validation like fine wine. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I left the family company. I got a job with a different marketing firm in another part of the city. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For the first time, I felt autonomy. And in that workplace, someone valued me. Not romantically, I wasn't looking for that, but as a professional, as a thinker. My manager, Dana, gave me responsibilities that matched my talents. Campaign strategy, customer psychology, trend forecasting. I thrived. I grew. I found Abigail again. But the guilt lingered. I visited home every Sunday for dinner, and every Sunday the same roles returned. Eleanor at the head of conversation, Dad always asking about her business connections, her new projects, her travel. To me, he asked polite questions like, "How's your marketing thing going?" He never remembered my job title. He never asked what I actually did. 3 years ago, my mother died. It was quick, an undiagnosed heart condition. It was the first time I saw Eleanor break. She cried hysterically at the funeral. But looking back, I realized I cried differently. Eleanor wept for the emotional disruption. I mourned the only person who ever saw me. After Mom's death, things got worse. Dad sunk deeper into loyalty to Eleanor, now nearly 40, still unmarried, devoted to the company. He relied on her heavily. At family gatherings, I was nearly invisible. At Christmas, Dad didn't even know what gift to get me. He asked Eleanor to choose one on his behalf. Then, last year, Dad fell ill. A stroke. He survived, but he wasn't the same. The responsibility of managing his affairs fell mainly to Eleanor. And I, despite visiting every weekend, bringing meals, helping him walk, talking with him, was still treated as the lesser daughter. And then came the inheritance meeting. We stood in my father's lawyer's office. Dark wood furniture, smell of leather, and a thick silence. My sister wore a confident navy suit, hair pulled back in a sleek bun, chin slightly lifted. I wore a simple cream blouse and brown trousers. The lawyer, Mr. Kensington, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "We are here to finalize the distribution of assets as outlined in Mr. Monroe's revised testament." Revised? I didn't know there had been any revisions. Eleanor leaned forward and said smoothly, "Yes, let's proceed. We don't want to waste anyone's time." He began reading. It was all going to Eleanor. The shares of the company, the real estate, the personal investment portfolios, the house, even Mother's jewelry. My name was barely mentioned, only receiving a small cash sum, equivalent to about a single year of average salary. I didn't speak. Not at first. I listened to the lawyer's voice drone on, confirming how thoroughly my existence had been minimized. I glanced at my father, expression unreadable. When the lawyer finished, Eleanor smiled at him and said, "Thank you, that's very clear. Shall we sign?" And then, that moment, she looked at me right into my eyes and said, "You were always different, Abigail. Dad always knew you wouldn't be able to handle responsibility. It's better this way." It was exactly what she had always wanted, the final, absolute validation that she was chosen and I was rejected. But I just smiled. A calm, knowing smile. That made her uneasy because she didn't expect calmness. She expected me to cry or protest or leave. Instead, I looked at my father and said quietly, "Dad, don't you know?" His eyebrows furrowed, not in anger, but confusion. Eleanor's smile faltered, because she didn't know what I meant. And I was about to expose something. It wasn't planned, not consciously. It just rose like a truth finally cracking the surface. I turned to the lawyer. "May I say something? Off the record?" Mr. Kensington hesitated. "If your father consents." Dad nodded. I looked back at Eleanor, her jaw tightening, and then I spoke. And what I said changed everything. Because there was one thing Eleanor never knew. One thing Dad never recognized. One truth Mom died with. And I was about to let it breathe. When I spoke those words, "Dad, don't you know?" the room went silent in a way that made your ears ache. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line. I could feel this shift in the air, the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. I took a breath, steadying myself, and began. You don't know because no one ever told you. Mom, Mom wanted me to inherit something far greater than any company or portfolio. She wanted me to inherit truth. My voice trembled, but I forced myself to continue. She left letters, Dad. Letters for each of us. I I found mine last week. It's about everything. How she saw us, how she knew what would happen, and how she hoped we would survive each other. Dad's hands shook slightly as he reached for his glasses, and Eleanor's confident posture began to crack. Letters, she repeated, disbelief in her voice. I nodded. Yes, letters. And the one meant for me? It changes everything. I could see the lawyer's eyes widen behind his glasses, the professional mask cracking. Mr. Kensington asked cautiously, Do you want to read it now? I shook my head. No, it's not for now. But Dad, you need to understand something. Mom didn't want us fighting over things. She wanted us to be prepared to see the truth and take responsibility, not just money or power. I looked at Eleanor. She tried to hide the twitch at the corner of her mouth, but I saw it. The smug calm she always carried now seemed fragile. Abby, what are you saying? You think this changes anything? Everything Dad has done, everything he's given me is proof of what's deserved, she said, voice sharp but slightly shaky. I smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. No, it doesn't change what's already been handed out, but it changes how we see it. I felt my chest tighten as memories flooded in. I remembered my childhood home in vivid detail. The hallway where Eleanor would walk past me without saying a word when I tried to tell her about a school achievement. The dinner table where Dad would ask about her grades first and only half listen when I answered. The quiet afternoons when I'd sit in my room and cry over the unfairness of it all. I remembered being 15 and saving up for months to buy my mom a birthday gift, only for her to gush over Eleanor's expensive bracelet from Dad and thank me half-heartedly. That hurt burned for years. But today, I realized the anger wasn't enough anymore. What I needed was clarity, and I finally had a way to get it. I leaned forward slightly, voice lower, pulling everyone in. Dad, remember when I wanted to take over the marketing campaign for the charity foundation Mom started? You said I wasn't ready. But the truth is, I've always been ready. Mom always knew I would be ready. She said I could handle things differently. Better, in fact. She always told me to keep going, even when she wasn't here, even when I felt invisible. She said that one day, I'd be the one people underestimated, and then they'd see me. Eleanor shifted in her seat, almost knocking over her glass of water. Abby, stop with this dramatics. What are you even trying to say? Her voice was rising, irritation now dripping like venom. I looked at her carefully. I'm saying, you think you've won, that the house, the shares, the jewelry, everything is proof you're the favorite child. But the one thing you don't see is that Mom's plan was never about money. It was about who carries her vision forward. Dad swallowed, face pale, hands clutching the armrests. He didn't speak, and I wasn't sure if it was shock, guilt, or some understanding slowly dawning. Eleanor's eyes flicked to him, seeking validation. Dad, what is she saying? I leaned back slightly, letting the tension build. I'm saying that all these years, you've been blinded by appearances, by who smiles the prettiest, who speaks the right words, who behaves as expected. Mom knew something we didn't, that I was learning, watching, waiting, and building resilience, that the real inheritance isn't the house, isn't the company, it's the strength to survive betrayal, favoritism, and indifference. I felt a tremor in the room. Eleanor's confident facade was cracking. I saw panic flash in her eyes, something she hadn't felt since childhood. Abby, this is insane. You're twisting everything. You weren't here when Dad made decisions. You weren't working in the company. Her voice was louder now, almost shrill. I shook my head. I was there, Eleanor, just in ways you didn't see. I was building my own path. I was learning who I am. And now, I've come full circle. Mom trusted me with something bigger than money. She trusted me with the truth of who our family really is. I paused, letting the weight of that statement sink in. Dad's lips pressed together, eyes distant, as if remembering some long-lost conversation. He whispered, almost to himself, She's right. Eleanor's face went pale. Dad, what does that mean? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. This was bigger than anything external. This was about years of manipulation, favoritism, and quiet exclusion. This was the moment where the lies that had been whispered for decades started to unravel. I looked around the room. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, papers rustling. I took a deep breath. Eleanor, you've been given everything, but do you really understand what you've been handed? Do you understand the cost of ignoring someone else's growth, someone else's patience, someone else's sacrifices? Her eyes flicked to me, and I thought I saw fear there. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The power she always wielded, the confidence that once seemed untouchable, was suddenly thin and fragile. Then the final piece dropped. I pulled out a small envelope from my purse. This was Mom's last message to me. She wrote it 3 days before she passed. And inside, she explained why she gave things the way she did, and why she believed I could survive the worst. Eleanor, I think you should hear it too. But first, Dad. I handed it to him. His hands shook violently as he took it, fingers trembling over the seal. He opened it slowly, unfolding the letter. His face turned ashen as he read. I saw tears form in his eyes, not just for Mom, but for everything he missed, for every moment he failed to see me, for every moment he validated Eleanor at my expense. And then for the first time, he looked at me, not with disappointment, not with surprise, but with a dawning understanding. I didn't speak. I just let the silence settle. Eleanor, meanwhile, was pale as death, eyes wide. She had never been this vulnerable. She had never been confronted by a truth she couldn't manipulate. I felt a strange calm, a satisfaction that wasn't about revenge. It was about recognition. Then Dad spoke, his voice trembling but firm. Abby, I didn't see it. I didn't see how strong you are. I thought, Eleanor, I thought I was making the right choices. I nodded slowly, letting him process. You were doing what you thought was best, but it blinded you, and it allowed others, like Eleanor, to benefit from appearances rather than substance. Eleanor's face twisted into anger, but it was powerless now. Abby, you can't just... I interrupted calmly. I don't want to. You have everything you thought you wanted, but some things money can't give. Integrity, truth, recognition, and yes, respect. The respect you always demanded but never earned from me. For the first time in decades, Eleanor was quiet. She had no words. And in that quiet, I saw the years of manipulation, the lies, the carefully cultivated envy, all laid bare. I looked at Dad. There's one more thing, I said. Mom left instructions for us, not just for inheritance. She wanted reconciliation, honesty, and boundaries. She wanted us to stop competing, stop hurting each other, and start acknowledging each other's worth. It's late, but it's not too late. Dad nodded slowly. Abby, thank you. I think I understand now. Eleanor finally spoke, voice low, almost a whisper. Abby, I don't know what to say. I smiled gently. You don't have to say anything. Just remember what Mom wanted. Remember that life isn't about winning over each other. It's about understanding and growing. And as I sat there, watching her face contort with the first real taste of humility in decades, I felt a strange peace. This wasn't just about money. This was about finally being seen. But then, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Abby, they don't know everything. There's something you still need to see. I stared at it, heart pounding, the room suddenly too small. Who could it be? What more could there possibly be?
The letter, the inheritance, the truth Mom had left, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot.
The message on my phone glowed like a warning. Abby, they don't know everything. There's something you still need to see. I froze, staring at the screen, heart hammering. My fingers hovered over the reply button, but I didn't press it. Who was this? And what could they possibly know that I didn't? The silence in the lawyer's office suddenly felt oppressive. Eleanor was still staring at me, eyes wide with the mixture of anger, confusion, and, dare I think it, fear. Dad sat quietly, the letter from Mom open in his hands, face pale but calm. I slipped the phone into my purse, telling myself I would deal with it later, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was coming. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about inheritance. Mom had left threads of truth scattered, like breadcrumbs leading to the one thing that would expose the full scope of the family's hidden fractures. I left the lawyer's office first, the tension inside me so thick it felt like it might suffocate me. Eleanor followed, muttering something about needing coffee. Dad remained behind, still reading Mom's letter. Outside, the city felt cold, indifferent. The streets were bustling, people going about their lives, oblivious to the storm that had just erupted inside a single office. I thought about Mom and her foresight, how she had predicted the division, the favoritism, and the betrayals. She had known that Eleanor would be aggressive, that Dad would be blind, and that I would be underestimated. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the events over and over, the smugness in Eleanor's voice, Dad's confusion, the way the lawyer had shifted uneasily when I mentioned Mom's letters, and the text. I decided to trace it. It wasn't easy. The number was masked, untraceable. Whoever it was, they wanted to remain hidden. My mind raced. Could it be someone from Dad's company? A family friend who had known Mom's secrets? Or could it be Eleanor? No, she wouldn't reach out in secret. She craved public validation. The next morning, I returned to the house, the same house I had grown up in. But now it felt different, tainted by decades of suppressed jealousy and neglect. Eleanor was in the kitchen, arms crossed, brewing coffee, eyes darting to me with suspicion. Abby, you're up early. Can't sleep? She asked, trying to sound casual. I nodded. Just thinking, I said. She studied me, lips tight. You know, Dad looked shaken yesterday. I didn't think he'd listen to you like that. I smiled faintly. Sometimes people finally hear what they've been missing. She didn't respond. Instead, she moved past me, clearly unsettled. I knew then that the first crack had appeared in her armor, and I was watching it widen. As the day progressed, Dad called me into his study. The air smelt faintly of old books and polished wood. a scent that had always made me feel both comfortable and constrained. He gestured for me to sit. Abby, I've been thinking. Mom's letter, it's not just about inheritance. There are things she wanted hidden until the right time. She mentioned a journal, something she kept secret for years. I I didn't know it existed until yesterday. My pulse quickened. A journal? I asked. Yes, she hid it, knowing I wouldn't find it, knowing Eleanor would never look, but she wanted you to see it. She said it contained the real story of our family, not just money or favoritism, but decisions, mistakes, manipulations, truths about why things happened the way they did. I nodded slowly, absorbing every word. This was bigger than I imagined. Everything Mom had left wasn't just guidance, it was evidence, proof, and validation of everything I had endured. Where is it? I asked. Dad handed me a small leather-bound book worn at the edges. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was Mom's, elegant, precise, filled with emotion. And then I began to read. The journal revealed everything. There were entries about Eleanor's early manipulations, subtle lies she had told to ensure she was always first, always chosen, always praised. Entries about how she would twist situations to make me seem incapable in Dad's eyes, even when I succeeded. There were mentions of gifts I had given Mom that went unappreciated, and Eleanor taking credit for small victories I had achieved in school and early adulthood. And then, buried in the middle, was a page that made my chest tighten. A confession from Mom. She had known Eleanor would eventually try to claim everything. She had known Dad's favoritism would blind him. She had written that she trusted me to see the truth, to grow stronger, and to handle the ultimate revelation. I sat there, shaking. All the years of neglect, the loneliness, the quiet suffering, it had been acknowledged, validated, documented by the one person who truly understood me. For the first time, I felt seen. For the first time, I felt powerful. But there was more. The journal mentioned a meeting scheduled for the following week, a secret family gathering Mom had planned, where the final distribution of her personal effects and investments would be addressed. And there, I realized, was the twist I hadn't anticipated. Mom had left instructions that Eleanor was not to be informed of certain investments. Real estate, offshore accounts, and philanthropic projects were earmarked specifically for me under my discretion. The realization hit me like lightning. Eleanor thought she had won everything, but she hadn't. Not everything, not by a long shot. I didn't have much time. I knew Eleanor would sense the shift, that she would try to uncover the journal, and she would try to manipulate the situation before I could assert control. I had to move carefully. When the gathering day arrived, tension filled the air. Eleanor arrived first, looking impeccable as always, but there was a tightness in her posture, a shadow behind her confident smile. Dad greeted her warmly, but I could see the unease flicker in his eyes. I walked in last, holding the journal and a few copies of documents I had prepared from Mom's notes. Eleanor noticed immediately. "What's that?" she asked, voice deceptively casual. I didn't answer. I smiled faintly. Just some things Mom wanted me to handle. As the lawyer began the proceedings, Eleanor tried to assert dominance, speaking loudly, directing questions to Dad, trying to control the room. But I was prepared. I presented my case calmly, referencing Mom's journal, her specific instructions, and the evidence of investments that Eleanor had no knowledge of. Dad's expression shifted from confusion to realization to something almost like pride. Eleanor's face drained of color as she realized she had been blindsided. "Abby, this can't be true," she stammered. I didn't raise my voice. I simply handed Dad the relevant pages. "Read for yourself, Dad. This is exactly what Mom wanted.
It's time we all see the truth." Dad's hands shook as he read. "Abby, she trusted you," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Eleanor's composure collapsed. She looked at me, pleading, accusing, desperate. "You've stolen everything. Mom trusted you over me. This is unfair." I shook my head. "It's not unfair. It's truth. Mom knew who I was, who we all are, and now she's finally letting us see it. You had your chance to be honest, Eleanor. You chose appearances over integrity." The room was silent, except for the sound of Dad turning pages and Eleanor breathing heavily. I felt a strange satisfaction, not revenge, but closure. I had endured years of manipulation, favoritism, and emotional neglect. Now, finally, the truth was mine. But just as I thought the storm had passed, my phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from an unknown address, with the subject line, "Abby, there's someone you don't know who's been watching. Mom wasn't the only one keeping secrets." I froze, stomach dropping. Someone else? Watching? Mom's careful plan? The journal? The inheritance? Could there really be more layers hidden? My mind raced. Who could it be? And what else had been hidden from me? Eleanor noticed my pause. "Abby, what now?" she asked, voice tight. I didn't answer. I only stared at the email, feeling a chill run down my spine. The realization hit me. This family saga wasn't over. The betrayal, the secrets, the manipulations, they had only begun to reveal themselves. And now, as I looked at Eleanor, a sudden understanding dawned. She had never been my enemy. Not really. The real enemy was the hidden truth, the layers of deceit, favoritism, and secrecy that had shaped every interaction, every decision, every heartbreak in my life. And now, I was about to uncover the deepest secret of all, the one that could change everything. The email sat on my phone, glaring like a neon warning. "Abby, there's someone you don't know who's been watching. Mom wasn't the only one keeping secrets." I stared at it frozen. My pulse raced. My hands shook slightly as I opened the message. The words inside were brief, but enough to make my stomach drop. "Meet me at the old Monroe estate. Come alone. I'll explain everything your mother kept from you and from Eleanor." The old Monroe estate, abandoned, locked for years after Dad sold parts of it, a place that held the echoes of our childhood, the fights, the laughter, the loneliness. My mind raced. Who could it be? A family friend, Mom's confidant, or someone else entirely? The thought of Eleanor discovering this terrified me. She was unpredictable, and I didn't want her meddling. I knew I had to go alone. I parked my car a few blocks away and approached the estate on foot. The autumn air was sharp, carrying the scent of decaying leaves. The mansion loomed ahead, broken windows, ivy climbing the sides like silent sentinels. I hesitated at the door, heart pounding. I could feel every memory of childhood flooding back. The holidays, the fights, the silent corners where I hid while Eleanor played with imaginary friends in the grand hall. I stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and old wood, and sunlight streamed through broken windows, casting long, jagged shadows. "Hello?" I called softly. Silence. And then a figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, slender, wearing a coat that hid their face. "You're Magalie Monroe?" the voice asked, calm but deliberate. "Yes," I said cautiously. "Who are you?" "I knew your mother very well. She trusted me with the truth, with everything she couldn't leave on paper. She knew one day you would come looking, and today you need to know the rest." I took a deep breath. What rest? The figure stepped closer, revealing an older woman, sharp eyes behind wire-framed glasses, hair streaked with silver. "I'm Margaret Lane, your mother's oldest friend. I helped her manage her private investments, her charities, and her plans for the family. And yes, she had reasons for what she did. reasons you are about to understand. I felt a shiver. This was bigger than I imagined. Show me, I whispered. Margaret handed me a leather binder, heavier than I expected. Inside, everything is documented. Eleanor's manipulations, Dad's favoritism, your struggles, your resilience, and a series of instructions your mother left for real empowerment. She wanted you to inherit not just financial wealth, but control over key projects she believed would change lives. And there's one last secret, the one she feared Eleanor might try to destroy. My hands shook as I opened the binder. Inside were contracts, bank statements, and detailed letters, everything meticulously organized. And then I saw it, a file labeled Eleanor Monroe, Limitations. I opened it, heart racing. The file contained documents that effectively limited Eleanor's control over Mom's foundations and investments. She had been given authority over visible assets, yes, but the real power, the philanthropic initiatives, the hidden accounts, and even Dad's remaining shares were all under my name to manage responsibly. I felt a surge of triumph, but also something deeper, a sense of justice long overdue. Eleanor hadn't won. She thought she had, but she hadn't, and Mom had orchestrated it perfectly. Then Margaret's voice cut through my thoughts. There's one more thing, Abigail. Your mother warned me about someone else, someone very close, who has been quietly working behind the scenes to manipulate outcomes. If you don't act carefully, they could undo everything. I frowned. Who? Margaret hesitated. I can't tell you directly. You need to figure it out. Look at the patterns, the texts, the subtle manipulations. Your mother left clues in the journal, in letters, and the way she distributed responsibilities. It's up to you to expose them. A chill ran down my spine. Someone else? Another hidden enemy? Suddenly, the inheritance meeting, the journal, Eleanor's smugness, it all felt like a prelude to something bigger. I left the estate, clutching the binder, my mind spinning. Back at my apartment, I began piecing it together. Reviewing old emails, texts, and letters, a pattern emerged. And then it hit me. The person's manipulating events from the shadows had been Dad's executive assistant all along. She had access to everything, knew every document, and subtly steered decisions to favor Eleanor. I realized I needed proof. Carefully, I accessed Dad's files and cross-referenced the events described in Mom's journal with the assistant's actions. There it was. Deliberate obfuscation, subtle misinformation, and attempts to make me seem unreliable or disengaged. It was all recorded. I had everything I needed. The next morning, I called Dad and Eleanor to the office. The lawyer was present as well. I presented the evidence calmly, detailing the assistant's manipulations and how they had been affecting the family's decisions. Dad's expression shifted from shock to anger. Eleanor's face pale and rigid. She did this? Eleanor whispered, disbelief and fear in her voice. Yes, I said firmly, and it's been hiding in plain sight for years. But now, the truth is visible. Mom's plan, the journal, the hidden assets, it all points to responsibility, integrity, and accountability, not appearances, not favoritism. Dad's eyes met mine. Abby, I never realized I was blind. I nodded. It's not too late to fix things, but boundaries need to be set and lessons learned. Mom intended for us to grow, not just inherit. Eleanor slumped, silent. The power she had wielded for decades crumbled around her. And I realized something profound. Revenge wasn't my goal. Recognition, clarity, and justice were. I wanted the family healed if possible. Weeks later, the family gathered to finalize the truly final distributions. Eleanor was given her share, yes,
but without the hidden foundations and assets that Mom had entrusted to me. Dad had begun attending therapy, understanding his biases and favoritism, and I finally felt seen, acknowledged, and empowered. I had endured betrayal, neglect, and emotional manipulation, but I had come out stronger, wiser, and capable of guiding not just myself, but the family toward real reconciliation. And then a final confrontation. Eleanor approached me quietly, tears in her eyes. Abby, I I thought I had everything. I didn't see. I didn't understand. I nodded. You had appearances. I had truth. And now you can choose what you do with that. Learn from it or continue repeating mistakes. The choice is yours. She nodded slowly, swallowing hard. I I want to try. I want to change. I reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. Then start with honesty. Start with recognizing the truth of others, not just yourself. And in that moment, a weight lifted from me. Not just the years of neglect or favoritism, but the years of carrying invisible scars. I felt a sense of healing, of boundaries finally respected, of lessons learned without bitterness consuming me. Looking back, I realized the inheritance was never about money. It was about understanding, resilience, and the courage to face betrayal without losing oneself. It was about seeing through appearances and valuing substance. It was about stepping into the light of truth when others tried to cast shadows. Months later, as I walked through a park near my apartment, I thought of Mom, of her foresight, of the journal, and of the layers of truth she had left me. I realized that life, like the inheritance, isn't always fair, but clarity, honesty, and perseverance can tip the balance. And now I ask you, have you ever experienced betrayal, favoritism, or manipulation that left you questioning your worth? Have you found the strength to uncover the truth, even when the people you trusted the most tried to blind you? Share your story in the comments. I promise it's never too late to find your voice, your clarity, and your peace. Because in the end, the real inheritance is the strength to rise above betrayal, to see truth where others see appearances, and to know your worth no matter what anyone else says.